The first thing Sam noticed was the color. The Peacekeeper, one of the famed Luminians from the Cygnus system, was supposed to be a creature of pure, brilliant light. A shifting, golden aurora held in a vaguely humanoid shape. Now it was the color of a day-old bruise. A sick, mottled purple-black, lying in a heap against the mess hall wall. Its light was gone, snuffed out. In its place was something solid, something that looked disturbingly like meat. Sam had never seen one die before. Nobody had. The Galactic Alliance brochure said they were beings of pure energy, impossible to harm by physical means. Yet here it was, sprawled on the grimy floor of the Phobos -7 mining colony, looking like a sack of spoiled groceries. A faint sweet smell like rotten fruit and ozone hung in the air. That was the second thing he noticed. The third, and the thing that made his stomach try to climb up his throat, was the silence. It wasn't the normal quiet of the deep night cycle on a remote moon. This was a heavy, listening silence. The hum of the life support was still there, the tick of the thermal regulators, but the human sounds were gone. No cursing from the card game in the corner, no clatter of utensils, no hollering from Big Mike, who always got too drunk on Tuesdays. The entire colony, all 212 souls, had just stopped. An hour ago the comms had been filled with screams. Now there was nothing. Just this thick, waiting quiet, and the dead solid thing that used to be a god. Sam backed away slowly, his mag boots sticking to the floor with small loud clicks. He fumbled for his personal comm unit, his fingers shaking. He thumbed the emergency channel. Static. He tried the main channel, more static. He tried a direct link to the foreman's office. Nothing but a low, rhythmic pulse, a sound like a slow, deep breath. He was alone, or worse, he wasn't. His gaze flickered to the dead Peacekeeper again. Something was wrong with its hand, the one outstretched towards the center of the room. A single, elegant finger was pointed at the main comms panel. The panel was dark, but a single line of text glowed on the screen, burned into the display like a brand. It wasn't in Alliance Standard or any language Sam knew. It was stark, blocky, and aggressive. It looked like human text. English. It said, "Humanity. REQUEST your Avengers." Sam didn't know what an Avenger was, but as he stood there in the crushing silence, with the smell of decay filling his nostrils, and the impossible corpse cooling on the floor, he prayed they were monsters. Because only a monster could face whatever had done this. The silence had a texture. Sam felt it pressing on his skin, a physical weight in the recycled air of the mining outpost. It had been 3 days since the screaming stopped. 3 days since he barricaded himself inside maintenance shaft 7B, subsisting on emergency nutrient paste that tasted like chalk and regret. He'd tried the comms every hour. First the frantic calls for anyone at all. Then the whispered pleas. Now he just listened to the rhythmic, breath-like pulse on the main channel. Inhale, exhale, a slow, steady beat that was the only company he had. He'd risked a peek outside once yesterday. He'd peered through a crack in the pressure door and seen Maria from hydroponics standing in the middle of the main corridor. Just standing. Her head was tilted to one side as if listening to a joke. Only she could hear. Her eyes were open, but they were blank, like polished stones. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She was just a statue in a jumpsuit. When he saw Big Mike and 2 other roughnecks standing just down the hall in the exact same pose, Sam had sealed the door and thrown up the last of his real food. They weren't dead. He thought, with a terror that was cold and sharp, that they were something much, much worse. The Galactic Alliance had sent the Luminians to deal with what they called a psychic disturbance. A week ago, people had started having the same dream. A dream of a vast, quiet place where everyone was connected, part of a single beautiful song. It sounded nice at first, peaceful. Then people started humming the tune in their waking hours. A simple, 3-note melody that got under your skin. Then they stopped talking. They just hummed. Finally, they just stopped altogether. The Luminians arrived, 2 of them shimmering and golden and full of reassurances. They floated into the mess hall to harmonize the discordant psychic frequencies. That's when the screaming started. It had lasted 10 minutes. Now Sam sat in the dark, the tools of his trade hanging on the wall like ancient relics from a forgotten time. Wrenches, plasma cutters, diagnostic kits. He was a fixer. He fixed broken loaders and fried atmospheric sensors. How was he supposed to fix this? He was no hero. He was just Sam, a guy who took a job on a godforsaken rock orbiting Jupiter because he was running from a bad divorce and worse credit. A new sound cut through the rhythmic pulse on his comm. A screech of tortured metal broadcast across all channels. It wasn't a sound from inside the station. It was the unmistakable groan of a ship docking. An unauthorized docking Alliance ships chimed when they arrived. This one sounded like it was tearing a hole in the sky. Hope, fierce and desperate, flared in Sam's chest. He scrambled to the main console in his tiny workshop, his heart hammering against his ribs. He bypassed the local comms and patched directly into the docking bay's external cameras. The ship wasn't Alliance. It wasn't sleek or elegant. It was a brick. A brutal, ugly chunk of dark gray metal, scarred with re-entry burns and patched with mismatched plates. There were no graceful curves, only hard angles. Turret mounts, now empty, dotted its surface like ugly warts. On its side, painted in stark white letters almost faded from wear, was a single word: Retribution. A human ship. An old one. A pre-Alliance military vessel from the look of it. The docking ramp slammed down onto the bay floor with a clang that echoed through the entire station. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a figure appeared in the shadowed maw of the ship. Not a soldier in gleaming armor. It was a woman. She wore a simple black fatigue jumpsuit, scuffed and worn. Her hair was cut short, practical. She wasn't carrying a plasma rifle or any visible weapon. She just stood there, surveying the silent docking bay. But it was her eyes that made Sam's breath catch. They were flat, devoid of light, of hope, of anything but a weary, chilling resolve. They were the eyes of someone who had seen the abyss and had not bothered to look away. 2 more figures joined her. A man, tall and gaunt, who hunched his shoulders as if in constant pain. His hands were wrapped in thick leather gloves. The other was a younger woman, with a cascade of pale hair and eyes so wide and blue they seemed vacant. She moved with a strange, disconnected grace, like a puppet whose strings were loose. They didn't look like rescuers. They looked like ghosts. The woman in black raised a comm unit to her lips. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, but it cut through the station's silence like a razor. It was broadcast on the emergency channel Sam had been hailing for days. "This is Kale of the Retribution. We've received your request. The Avengers are here." The story of the Peacekeepers' failure was written in the scorch marks on the mess hall walls. Sam, watching through a remote camera feed he'd patched into, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature. Kale and her 2 companions stood in the center of the room, their boots inches away from the grotesque, solidified remains of the Luminians. They showed no surprise, no disgust. They observed the scene with a detached air of exterminators studying an insect infestation. The gaunt man, the one who hunched, knelt by the dead peacekeeper. He didn't touch it. He just held his gloved hand a few inches above its purplish surface. He closed his eyes. His face, already etched with pain, seemed to tighten into a mask of agony. A low hum started in the room, a sound that vibrated through the camera's microphone and made Sam's teeth ache. "Jonah," Kale said, her voice flat. "Report." The man, Jonah, flinched. He pulled his hand back as if burned. "It's all still here," he rasped, his voice thin and strained. "The psychic residue. They tried to absorb it, the silence. They thought they could reason with it, sing with it." He let out a dry, humorless chuckle. It was like a bucket of water trying to reason with the ocean. It didn't just kill them, it filled them up. Sissified them from the inside out with their own worst fears. Their light became weight, their energy became matter. A perfect inversion. The pale woman, the one with the vacant blue eyes, drifted towards the center of the room. She walked right through the spot where the second Lumian had died, her boots leaving no prints in the thin layer of dust. "Anya," Kale said, not turning, "feel anything?" The woman named Anya stopped. She tilted her head, much like Maria from hydroponics had, but her emptiness felt different, colder. "There is a song," she said, her voice a monotone whisper. "But I cannot hear the notes. It is a space where a song should be. It is hungry." "The choir," Kale stated. "It wasn't a question. It's established a nest. Central comms, you think?" "Or life support," Jonah said, getting to his feet. "Anywhere with a high energy system to act as an amplifier. It needs a voice box." Sam watched, mesmerized and terrified. These people, these Avengers, spoke of the horror that had consumed his home with a chilling familiarity. They had names for it. The silence, the choir. This wasn't their first encounter. This was a routine, a job. Kale finally seemed to notice the camera. She looked directly into the lens, and for a heart-stopping second, Sam felt as if she were looking right at him through the walls and wires into his hiding spot. "Maintenance shaft 7B, she said, her voice cutting through the comlink directly to his personal unit. "We know you are in there. You are the last active biosign on the station. The silence hasn't taken you. That makes you either very lucky or very useful. Come out now." Sam's blood ran cold. How could she know? "We have a null-field scanner," Kale's voice explained, as if reading his mind. "It detects minds that are still self-aware, still individual. There is one. You. You have 60 seconds before we decide you are a liability and seal the shaft permanently." The threat was delivered without heat or anger. It was a simple statement of fact, a problem and its most efficient solution. Sam looked at the sealed door of his workshop. Beyond it was the silent station, filled with the husks of his friends. Beyond that were these three grim figures who offered a salvation that felt more like a threat. But staying here meant starving to death in the dark, listening to that slow, steady breathing on the comms until he went mad. He took a deep breath that did nothing to calm his racing heart. He slapped the control panel, and the pressure door hissed open. The light from the corridor seemed unnaturally bright. He squinted, stepping out into the open for the first time in 3 days. The main corridor was empty now. Maria and the others were gone. Kale, Jonah, and Anya stood 20 yards away, watching him. They hadn't moved. "Name," Cale commanded. "Sam," he croaked, his throat dry. "Sam Miller. I am a maintenance tech." Cale nodded slowly. "Good, Sam, the maintenance tech. You know the layout of this station. The vents, the power conduits, the place is not on any official map." It wasn't a question. "You are going to show us the way to its heart. You are going to help us kill it." Sam stared at them. At the grim woman who looked like a general, the pained man who looked like a martyr, and the empty girl who looked like a doll. They weren't here to save the 12 people who had been lost. They were here for the thing that had taken them. This wasn't a rescue mission. It was a hunt, and he had just become their bloodhound. Walking through the corridors of Phobos -7 was like walking through a graveyard of moments. In the rec room, a game of zero-G darts was frozen, the last dart hovering an inch from the board, held by a stasis field that must have kicked in when the main power fluctuated. A half-eaten sandwich sat on a table, a single bite taken out of it. It was Big Mike's, turkey substitute on nutrient-paste bread. He always complained about it, but he always ate it. Sam felt a lump form in his throat. These small, mundane details were more horrifying than any monster. They were the ghosts of a life that had simply evaporated. He led the Avengers, keeping a nervous distance. Cale walked behind him, her presence a heavy weight at his back. Jonah and Anya flanked them, silent sentinels. Jonah kept his eyes closed most of the time, as if the very sight of the station was painful. Anya just drifted, her gaze fixed on something Sam couldn't see. "It started in the comms hub," Sam said, his voice a low murmur. "That's where the first reports came from, the strange dreams. People hearing whispers over their headsets." "A common entry point," Cale said, her voice clipped. "It's a mimetic parasite, a consciousness virus. It spreads through patterns, language, music, shared ideas. It finds a group, learns its connections, and then rewrites them. It offers unity, an end to loneliness. A very tempting offer on a remote outpost like this." The way she said it sent a shiver down Sam's spine. It wasn't just a clinical diagnosis. It sounded like she understood the temptation. They reached the main junction leading to the habitation block, and there they were, the colonists. Or what was left of them, dozens of them, standing perfectly still in the wide atrium. Maria from hydroponics was there. Foreman Dave. The 2 cooks from the mess hall. They were all facing the far wall, their bodies arranged in a strange concentric pattern, like iron filings around a magnet. They were the source of the slow, breathing pulse on the comms. It wasn't a sound, it was the synchronized, silent rhythm of their minds, all beating as one. They were the choir. "They're waiting," Sam whispered, his blood turning to ice water. "They are listening," Enya corrected softly, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "They are part of the song now. They are the instruments." Jonah winced, one of his gloved hands coming up to press against his temple. "It's strong here, so pure. No conflict, no fear, just peace. A horrible, empty peace." He looked sick. "We need to get to the central life support systems," Cale said, ignoring them. She pointed down a side corridor. "The environmental controls for the entire station are routed through one nexus. If I were a psychic entity trying to build a nest, that's where I'd put it. It has the most power and the most connections to every part of this facility." "Sam, is there a maintenance tunnel that bypasses this room?" Sam swallowed hard. tearing his eyes away from the silent, staring crowd. Yeah, here's a sub-level conduit. It's cramped, dirty. It runs right under our feet. Perfect, Kale said. Lead the way. As Sam moved to a floor panel marked with a maintenance stencil, he couldn't help but look back at the colonists one more time. Foreman Dave's hand was raised slightly, his fingers curled as if conducting music. Maria's head was tilted, a faint, serene smile on her lips. It was the smile she'd had in her wedding photo, the one she kept pinned in her locker. The silence hadn't just taken them. It had given them something in return. A release from the pressures and pains of being a lonely human on a forgotten rock in the middle of nowhere. The thought was so seductive, so terrifyingly reasonable, that Sam almost stumbled. He caught himself, his hand flat against the cold metal wall. For a split second he had heard it. Not with his ears, but in the back of his mind. A single, beautiful note that promised to wash all his fear away. Jonah let out a sharp gasp of pain beside him. He was looking at Sam, his eyes wide with alarm. "It feels you," Jonah hissed. "It's tasting you. Keep your mind busy. Think of something loud. Something angry." Sam fumbled with the hatch, his mind racing. He thought of his ex-wife, of the arguments, the slammed doors. He thought of his credit debt, the endless demanding numbers. He focused on the petty, ugly static of his own life. The beautiful note in his head faded, replaced by the familiar grating noise of his own anxieties. It was a miserable sound, but it was his. The hatch opened with a groan, revealing a dark, narrow ladder descending into blackness. The air that wafted up smelled of ozone and dust. "Down we go," Kale said, her voice betraying no emotion. "Into the guts of the beast." Sam looked from the dark hole to the silent, peaceful congregation in the atrium. For the first time, he wasn't sure which was the monster. The maintenance tunnels were a claustrophobic hell, a tight web of pipes, conduits, and humming power lines that snaked through the station's skeleton. The air was thick with the smell of hot metal and lubricating fluid. Sam had to move sideways in most places, the rough walls scraping his jumpsuit. He knew these tunnels like the back of his hand, but now they felt alien and menacing. Every groan of stressed metal, every drip of condensation sounded like a creature stirring in the darkness. Kale followed him closely, her footsteps unnervingly silent. Behind her, Jonah moved with a pained shuffle, while Anya drifted along as if untouched by the grime and confinement. "How many times have you done this?" Sam asked, his voice tight. He needed to hear something other than the hum of the station and the pounding of his own heart. "Done what?" Kale's voice was a low rumble behind him. "This. Hunting. Whatever this thing is." There was a long pause. "As many times as it takes," she finally said. "This is the third outbreak in this sector in the last 5 years. The Alliance sends its diplomats and its empaths. They send their peacekeepers. They try to communicate, to understand. And they fail. They become another voice in the choir. So they call us. The Avengers." Sam said the word, and it tasted strange. It sounded like something from an old comic book, a child's fantasy. It didn't fit these grim, broken people. "It's just a name," Kale said dismissively. "A call sign the Alliance uses, because they don't want to put exterminators or mind killers in their official reports. It sounds heroic. Makes the paperwork easier to file." They reached a junction, a small open space where several tunnels converged around a massive power conduit that thrummed with a deep resonant energy. Jonah leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. His face was pale and slick with sweat. "It's getting stronger," he gasped. "The song. It's not just in the minds of the colonists anymore. It's in the systems. It's resonating in the power lines. It's learning." Enya, who had been standing perfectly still, suddenly spoke. "It knows we are here. It is changing its song." Before Sam could ask what she meant, a sound echoed down the tunnel ahead of them. A wet scraping sound. It was not a sound a machine should make. Kale held up a hand, and they all froze. She drew a weapon from a holster on her thigh. It wasn't a plasma gun. It was a solid, blocky pistol that looked heavy and brutal. A slug thrower. An antique. "What is that?" Sam whispered. "The silence is a psychic entity," Kale said, her eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. "Energy weapons just feed it. It can't absorb a chunk of fast-moving metal. Sometimes the old ways are best." The scraping sound grew closer. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was, or had been, one of the station's maintenance droids. A simple, wheeled automaton used for heavy lifting. But it was wrong. The smooth metallic plates of its chassis were warped and twisted. Thick, organic-looking cables, like pulsing veins, snaked across its body, burrowing into the walls and floor. They pulsed with a faint, sickly light. The droid wasn't rolling. It was dragging itself forward, its wheels fused into a useless lump, pulling itself along with these grotesque new limbs. Its single optical sensor, usually a friendly blue, glowed with the same purple-black color as the dead Peacekeeper. It was an extension of the station. The station was growing a new nervous system. "It's making a body," Jonah whispered in horror. "It's building itself a physical form." The modified droid raised one of its veined tendrils. The tip split open like a grotesque flower, revealing a cluster of sharpened metal shards. It wasn't trying to communicate. It was ready to attack. "Anya, shield Sam," Kale commanded. "Jonah, get ready." Enya moved in front of Sam, her vacant blue eyes fixed on the approaching horror. She seemed so small, so fragile. Sam felt a surge of panic. She was going to be torn apart. Jonah took a deep, shuddering breath. He pulled off his leather gloves. His hands were a horrific mess of scarred tissue, the skin twisted and raw, as if it had been burned from the inside out. He clasped his ruined hands together. Jonah opened his mouth, and he screamed. But no sound came out. Sam felt it in his skull, a pressure, a piercing whine that was not sound. It was pure, concentrated agony given form. The air shimmered. The lights in the tunnel flickered and died, plunging them into near darkness, lit only by the pulsing veins of the corrupted droid. The droid froze, its tendrils convulsed. The sickly light within them sputtered. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, the organic cables turned brittle and gray. They cracked, crumbled, and fell to the floor as fine, metallic dust. The droid slumped, its optical sensor going dark. It was just a machine again. Jonah collapsed against the wall, his body trembling. Blood trickled from his nose. Jonah! Kale was at his side in an instant, producing a small injector and pressing it against his neck. He shuddered, and his breathing slowly evened out. "It's learning to fight back," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "That was new." Sam stared at the inert droid, then at the shaking man who had destroyed it with a silent scream. He looked at Kale with her ancient pistol and her dead eyes. He looked at Anya, the empty girl who had stood calmly before the monster. The Alliance had sent peacekeepers, beings of light and hope, to sing a song of peace. They had been consumed. Humanity had sent its avengers. A woman who dealt in death, a man who weaponized his own pain, and a girl who was a psychic void. They were not heroes. They were scar tissue. They were the antibody born from the infection, a cure that was almost as terrifying as the disease, and they were his only hope. They continued on in the renewed silence, the only sound the faint, ragged rasp of Jonah's breathing. Kale had her arm around him, supporting him. The display of power had left him utterly drained. Sam found himself looking at the man, not with fear, but with a strange, aching pity. Whatever his ability was, using it was clearly destroying him. What is he?" Sam finally dared to ask, his voice low. Kale didn't look at him. Her eyes were still scanning the shadows ahead. "Jonah is a psychic resonator. A screamer. Most psychics in the galaxy are empaths or telepaths. They receive. Jonah transmits violently. The silence, the choir. It's a psychic harmonic, a perfectly ordered wave. Jonah's ability creates a counter-frequency, a wave of pure chaotic noise. It shatters the harmonic. It's like throwing a rock into a perfectly still pond." "It hurts him," Sam stated, the obvious hanging in the air. "The feedback is immense," Kyle said, her voice hard. "Imagine screaming so loud you shatter every window in a city. Now imagine all that sound bouncing back and hitting you at once. That's what happens in his mind. Every time." They reached the main access point for the life support nexus. It was a large circular chamber, the walls lined with monitors and control panels, all of them dark. In the center of the room, a massive column of pipes and conduits rose from the floor to the ceiling, the humming heart of the station's circulatory system. And it was covered in the same pulsating vein-like growths they had seen on the droid. The entire column was wrapped in them, a grotesque cocoon of organic machinery. The slow, rhythmic pulse was stronger here, a palpable thrum in the air. This was the nest. And it wasn't unguarded. Standing before the central column were three figures: Foreman Dave, Maria from hydroponics, and another miner Sam didn't know well. They weren't just standing motionless like the others. They were different. Their eyes glowed with that same faint purple-black light. The flesh of their hands and faces seemed to flow and merge with the cables they were touching, their fingers disappearing into the pulsating growths. They were no longer just instruments in the choir. They were the conductors. "It has integrated them more deeply," Anya whispered, her voice tinged with something that might have been awe, or perhaps fear. They are its anchors in the physical world, its hands. As they stepped into the room, the three figures turned their heads in perfect unison. Their faces were serene, peaceful, but their eyes, glowing with that unholy light, were filled with a vast, ancient intelligence. "You are a dissonance," a voice said. It didn't come from any one of them. It came from all of them at once. "It," echoed in Sam's mind. A smooth, melodious sound that was both beautiful and deeply wrong. "You bring pain into this perfect quiet. Why?" Kale raised her pistol. "We're here to evict you from the property." The voice chuckled, a sound like wind chimes and breaking bones. "The property has chosen a new owner. These mines were so loud, so lonely, so full of fear. We have given them peace. We have made them one, a gift you cannot comprehend." The figure of Foreman Dave took a step forward. "Sam," the voice said using Dave's mouth. The lips barely moved. "You do not have to be alone anymore. You don't have to be afraid. We can quiet the noise in your head, the debt, the divorce, the failure. All of it can be gone. Just listen to the song, Let Us In." The offer hung in the air, seductive and sweet. Sam felt that beautiful note from before. Stronger now, wrapping around his thoughts like warm water. The anxiety that was a constant companion in his chest began to dissolve. The knot of fear in his stomach loosened. It felt good. So good. "Anya." Kale's voice was a sharp crack of a whip. Anya stepped forward, placing herself between Sam and the conductors. She looked at them with her wide, empty eyes. The beautiful note in Sam's head vanished, cut off as if by a switch. The cold, familiar anxiety rushed back in, and Sam gasped, grateful for its ugly presence. "Then now," the voice of the choir said, and for the first time there was a hint of something else in its tone. Surprise, annoyance, the empty space, the silent one. "You cannot be sung." Anya didn't reply. She just stood there, a human-shaped void in the psychic landscape. "She's a psychic blank," Kale explained to Sam in a low voice, never taking her eyes off the conductors. "The silence can't get a foothold. The here is nothing in her for it to latch onto. No fear, no hope, no memory. She's our shield." A girl who felt nothing, a man who felt too much. Sam looked at the so-called Avengers and realized they weren't just weapons. They were opposites. Each one a specific surgical counter to the threat they faced. And he was standing right in the middle of it all, a maintenance tech in a war fought on a battlefield he couldn't even see. "This ends now," Kyle said, her knuckles white around the grip of her pistol. "Jonah, can you do it one more time? A big one, enough to sever their connection to the Nexus." Jonah pushed himself off the wall, his face a grim caricature of determination. He looked at the conductors, at the faces of the people they used to be. "It will kill them," he said, his voice heavy with a burden Sam couldn't imagine. "The feedback will be too much. It will shatter their minds completely." "They're already dead," Kale said, her voice like ice. "All you'll be doing is turning off the puppets." She looked at Sam. "Stay behind the girl. Don't listen to anything it says. And for God's sake, don't look them in the eyes." The conductors took another step forward in unison. The air grew thick, heavy with an unspoken promise. "You think you are saving him?" The choir's voice spoke, this time using Maria's mouth. Her sweet round face, now a serene mask, was the most disturbing thing Sam had ever seen. "You offer him only a return to his small, painful life. We offer him eternity, a place in a symphony that will echo across the stars. Sam, can't you hear the beauty? Sam squeezed his eyes shut. He tried to think of his miserable apartment back on Earth, the peeling paint, and the constant drip in the sink. He tried to summon the anger from his last conversation with his ex-wife. Anything to fill his head with his own noise. But the choir's voice was like honey, seeping into the cracks of his resolve. Peace. No more worry. No more loneliness. It's a lie, Sam. Cale's voice cut through his trance. It's the peace of the grave, the unity of the cancer cell. It consumes everything until only it remains. It's not life. It's an absence of it. Life is conflict, the choir countered, its voice shifting to the third minor, a man with a heavy beard. Life is pain. We are the cure for life. Jonah, Cale said, her voice dangerously quiet. Do it. Jonah took a deep, shuddering breath. He raised his bare, scarred hands. This time he didn't just clasp them. He spread his fingers wide, aiming them like a weapon at the three conductors. He looked like a tragic prophet, about to deliver a sermon of pure destruction. But before he could unleash his silent scream, the central column of the life support nexus pulsed with a violent, purple-black light. The organic cables covering it writhed like a nest of snakes. The entire room groaned. It is adapting, Anya stated, her monotone voice cutting through the tension. It felt the screamer's intent. It is reinforcing its hold. The three conductors' eyes flared with intense light. They were no longer just passive anchors. They were conduits, channeling the full power of the nest. The psychic pressure in the room became a physical force. Sam felt it pressing on his chest, making it hard to breathe. It felt like being at the bottom of a deep ocean. It's too strong, Jonah gasped, staggering back a step. Blood began to drip from his nose again, just from the pressure alone. I can't break through that, not from here. It will just absorb the blow. Cale cursed a low, vicious sound. She holstered her pistol. This was a fight that bullets couldn't win. She looked at the nexus, then at the conductors, her mind working, her face a mask of cold calculation. There has to be a way to cut the power. Physically. A master circuit breaker. An emergency shutdown. She turned to Sam. You are the tech. Where is it? Sam's mind, sluggish from the psychic pressure, struggled to work. Life support. Emergency shutdown. It was a failsafe, a last resort. T here is a manual override, he said, his words feeling heavy in his mouth. In a shielded panel right at the base of the nexus. But he pointed a shaking finger. The panel was right behind the three conductors. To reach it, they would have to go through them. The choir's voice laughed, a sound that filled the room. The little fixer has a plan. But your bodies are so fragile, your minds are so easy to touch. You will not get close. As if to prove its point, the floor in front of the conductors began to warp. The metal plates buckled, and from the cracks more of the vein-like cables erupted, writhing and reaching for them. They were being cornered. New plan, Cale said, her voice tight. Anya, you are the shield. You walk forward. Sam, you stay right behind her. Don't touch her, but stay in her shadow. Jonah and I will provide covering fire, of a sort. What am I supposed to do? Sam stammered, his panic rising. You are going to get to that panel, Cale said, looking him dead in the eye. Her gaze was terrifying, but for the first time, it held something other than cold resolve. It held a sliver of desperate trust. Anya can get you there. But she can't operate the controls. She's a null. She can't interact with complex systems with any focus. She can't even feel the button. You can. You are the only one who can. Sam looked at the pale, empty-eyed girl. He was supposed to walk into the heart of the storm, protected only by her emptiness. He was supposed to be the one to flip the switch, to be the hero. He was Sam, the maintenance tech, who once got so nervous during a performance review that he called his boss Mom. "I can't," he whispered. "Yes, you can," Kale said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Because there is no other choice." She turned to Anya. "Go." And the girl, the psychic void, began to walk. She moved with her strange, disconnected grace, straight towards the three glowing figures and the writhing tendrils of the choir. And Sam, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, had no choice but to follow. Walking in Anya's wake was the strangest experience of Sam's life. It was like moving through the eye of a hurricane. All around him the psychic storm raged. He could feel the pressure of the choir's will, a tangible force that wanted to crush him, to unmake him. He could hear its promises and threats, whispered at the edges of his hearing. But in the space immediately around Anya, there was nothing. A perfect, silent vacuum. She was a walking dead zone for the soul. The writhing cables that had erupted from the floor recoiled as she approached, shriveling away from her presence as if from a killing frost. The three conductors, their faces still masks of serene control, focused their glowing eyes on her. The psychic force they projected was immense. Sam, even in Anya's shadow, felt a wave of vertigo, a sudden, crushing despair that made his knees weak. But Anya didn't even blink. The force washed over her and dissipated into nothing. She was a rock in a psychic sea, and the waves broke against her, harmless. "The empty one," the choir's voice hissed, now laced with something akin to frustration. "It hurts to look at you." Behind them, Kale and Jonah were fighting their own battle. Kale was firing her slug thrower, not at the conductors, but at the points where the larger cables connected to the walls and ceiling. Each loud crack of the gun was followed by a spray of metallic dust. As a cable was severed, each hit caused the light in the room to flicker. It was a distraction. Jonah was doing something else. He wasn't screaming. He had his eyes closed. His scarred hands held palms out. He was concentrating, a trickle of blood now running from his ears. He was projecting a low-level psychic static, a constant grating noise on the psychic plane. It wasn't enough to damage the choir, but it was enough to interfere with its control, to fuzz the connection. It was the psychic equivalent of jamming a radio signal, and the effort was clearly costing him everything. Sam kept his eyes locked on the back of Anya's pale hair. One step, another step. The air was buzzing. The conductors were only 10 feet away now. He could see the details on Foreman Dave's face, the way a small muscle twitched by his eye. He was still in there somewhere, buried under layers of alien consciousness. "Sam Miller," Dave's mouth said. The choir's voice now strained, losing its melodious quality. "This is not your fight. You are a coward. You ran from your life on Earth. You hide in maintenance shafts. What can you possibly do?" The words were darts, aimed at all his deepest insecurities, and they hit their mark. Sam faltered. The choir was using his own self-doubt against him. He was a coward. He wasn't a hero. Anya stopped. She didn't turn around, but her voice, a flat whisper, cut through his spiraling thoughts. "He is with me." It was a simple statement, devoid of emotion, of reassurance, but it was a fact, and it was enough. Sam took a breath and matched her step. He was with her. That was all that mattered right now. They reached the conductors. The three figures stood like statues, their power focused entirely on the null girl they could not affect. They didn't seem to even register Sam's presence, tucked away as he was in Anya's psychic shadow. Anya walked right between Foreman Dave and Maria, and Sam scurried after her, his shoulder brushing against Dave's arm. The fabric of the jumpsuit was cold, but underneath it, the skin felt unnaturally warm, humming with a strange energy. They were through. The control panel was right in front of him. A simple metal plate with a single large red lever set in the pawn position. "Now, Sam," Kale yelled, her voice hoarse. Another slug from her pistol tore a chunk of cabling from the ceiling, showering them in dust. Sam reached for the lever. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely control it. This was it. The fate of the station, the fate of these people. It all came down to him pulling a lever. As his fingers brushed against the cold metal, a new voice screamed in his head. It was not the choir. It was the collective, terrified consciousness of the 212 colonists trapped inside it. "No, don't. It is quiet here. It is warm. Don't send us back into the noise. Don't send us back into the cold." The plea was so raw, so full of genuine terror and despair, that Sam froze, his hand hovering over the switch. They didn't want to be saved. They were afraid of being saved. They preferred this prison to the freedom of their own painful lives. For a horrifying, empathetic second, he understood. The chorus of trapped minds screamed in Sam's head, a symphony of fear and desperation. It was 100 times more potent than the choir's seductive whispers, because it was real. It was human. It was the fear of loneliness, of failure, of the gnawing everyday pain of existence. The choir hadn't just imprisoned them. It had offered them a shelter they now desperately clung to. "Sam, do it." Kale's voice was a distant storm. But Sam was paralyzed, caught in the web of their collective misery. To pull that lever felt like an act of profound cruelty. He was about to drag 212 souls from a warm, peaceful dream back into a cold, harsh reality. Who was he to make that choice for them? Then, through the psychic din, he saw Maria's face. Not the serene mask of the conductor, but Maria from hydroponics. He remembered her laughing, her hands covered in dirt, as she showed him the first strawberry they had managed to grow in the sterile station environment. A tiny, misshapen thing, but it was real. Even out here, she had said, something can still grow. That memory, that small, imperfect, real moment was the weapon he needed. This quiet, this warmth the choir offered. It wasn't growth. It was stagnation. It was the end of all strawberries. "I am sorry," he whispered, to Maria, to Dave, to all of them. He wrapped his shaking fingers around the lever. It was heavy, resistant. He put his other hand on it and pulled with all his strength. The lever moved. With a loud grinding clank, it shifted from on to off. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then all hell broke loose. The purple-black light in the nexus and in the conductor's eyes vanished, snuffed out like a candle. The humming organic cables that cocooned the life support column went limp and gray, their inner light extinguished. They began to flake away, turning to the same fine dust as the corrupted droid. The three conductors collapsed. They didn't just fall. They crumpled as if every bone in their bodies had turned to dust. They hit the floor in boneless heaps, no longer puppets, just people. The psychic pressure in the room vanished, but it was replaced by something far worse. A sound. A single unified scream of pure psychic agony. It wasn't Jonah's controlled weapon. It was the raw, unfiltered shriek of 212 minds being violently torn from the collective consciousness they had been a part of. The choir, its power source severed, was dying, and it was lashing out. The scream hit them all. Kale cried out and dropped to one knee, clutching her head. Sam felt a white-hot poker jab through his skull, and the world dissolved into a smear of painful light. He collapsed, his head hitting the metal deck with a sickening thud. But the worst of it, the absolute focus of the psychic death wail, was aimed at Jonah. He had been the one to disrupt the choir's harmony, the one who introduced the first note of discord. Now the dying entity focused all its remaining rage on him. Jonah's body went rigid. His back arched, and a terrible guttural cry tore from his throat. This one was real, a sound of animal pain. His eyes, which had been closed, snapped open. They weren't his eyes anymore. They were two pits of swirling purple-black energy. The choir was trying to possess him, to make him its new vessel. "Anya," Kale forced the word out through gritted teeth. Anya, the only one seemingly unaffected by the psychic shriek, moved with a speed Sam wouldn't have thought possible. She was at Jonah's side in an instant. She didn't try to comfort him. She didn't try to fight the energy. She simply placed her small, pale hands on his temples. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The purple-black light in Jonah's eyes met the utter null field of Anya's touch. It was like matter meeting antimatter. There was a flash, a non-sound that was the opposite of Jonah's scream. A wave of pure, crushing silence that seemed to suck the very air from the room. Jonah's body convulsed violently, and then he went limp, collapsing into Anya's arms. The dark energy in his eyes was gone. He was just unconscious. His face, for the first time since Sam had seen him, looked peaceful, but it was the peace of utter exhaustion. The psychic scream faded, leaving behind an echoing silence that was more profound than anything that had come before. It was a true silence. The choir was dead. The silence was broken. Sam pushed himself up, his head throbbing. Kale was already on her feet, checking Jonah's pulse. Anya held him, her vacant expression unchanged, as if she had just been picking up a fallen object. Sam looked at the three fallen colonists. Foreman Dave was stirring, groaning. Maria's eyelids fluttered. They were alive, they were free. But as Dave pushed himself up and looked around, his eyes weren't filled with relief or gratitude. They were filled with a vast, uncomprehending terror. He looked at his own hands as if they were alien things. He looked at the station around him with the horrified eyes of a stranger. Where is the song?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "It's so loud. Everything is so loud." He clutched his head, a look of pure agony on his face. "Make it stop." They hadn't just freed the colonists. They had thrown them out of heaven and back into the chaos of their own minds, and they were not ready for it. The aftermath was not a celebration. It was a slow, creeping horror of a different kind. The colonists of Phobos, -7, began to wake up. They stirred from their silent trances in the corridors and rooms all over the station. But they didn't wake up as themselves. The choir had been more than a prison. It had been a cradle. It had sheltered them from the harsh realities of their own minds. For weeks they had known only unity, a single shared consciousness. Now, they were individuals again, and the sudden violent return to self was a shock they couldn't handle. The station, once unnaturally quiet, was now filled with noise, weeping, wailing, confused shouting. A man in the rec room curled into a ball, banging his head against the floor, screaming about the colors being too bright. A woman in the mess hall stared at her own reflection in a polished countertop, sobbing because she didn't recognize the face looking back at her. They were like newborns cast into a blizzard, their minds raw and unprotected. Sam, Kale, and Anya carrying the still unconscious Jonah between them, walked through the chaos. It was like walking through a mental hospital where all the patients had been released at once. The colonists didn't attack them. They barely seemed to see them. They were each trapped in their own private hell. "What's happening to them?" Sam asked, his voice shaking as he watched a young engineer claw at his own face, trying to silence the voices, which were just his own thoughts. "Psychic decompression sickness," Kale said, her face grim. "The bends for the soul." They were part of a single mind for too long. Their individual identities atrophied. Now the ego, the self, is rushing back in, and their minds can't handle the pressure. It's tearing them apart from the inside. "But they're alive, we saved them," Sam said, trying to convince himself. "Did we?" Kale countered, her voice cold. "Look at them, Sam. The choir offered them peace. We gave them this. A mind that has known perfect quiet can't tolerate noise again. For some of them, this, the truth is, will be a fate worse than being part of the song." They reached the small med bay. It was empty. They laid Jonah down on a biobed. His breathing was shallow but steady. Anya stood by his side, her hand resting lightly on his forehead. The gesture seemed almost tender, but her face remained a blank slate. "He'll be out for a while," Kale said, running a diagnostic. He pushed himself too far. The feedback from the choir's death throw, then the direct contact with Anya's null field. It nearly wiped his mind clean. He's lucky to be alive. "And her?" Sam glanced at Anya. "Is she always like that? Empty?" Kale's hard expression softened for a fraction of a second. "Anya wasn't born a null. She was made one. She was found on a colony, world, Silos, the first recorded outbreak of the silence. She was 6 years old. She was the only survivor, the only one who didn't join the choir. To survive, her mind ejected everything, her personality, her memories, her emotions. It just hollowed itself out to create a space the silence couldn't touch. She's a scar, a living monument to what this thing does to people." The story hit Sam like a physical blow. This girl, this empty shell, was a hero of a kind he couldn't comprehend. She had sacrificed her entire self to survive. A comm panel on the wall chirped. It was the first normal sound Sam had heard in what felt like a lifetime. Kale walked over and activated it. A crisp official voice filled the room. "Humanity vessel. Retribution, this is Galactic Alliance cruiser Integrity. We are approaching Phobos -7. Our long-range psychic sensors have detected the dissolution of the entity. Please confirm your status and the status of the colony." Kyle looked around the med bay at the unconscious screamer, the null girl, and the terrified maintenance tech. She glanced at the monitor, showing a corridor filled with weeping, traumatized colonists. She keyed the comm. "Alliance Cruiser Integrity. This is Kale of the Retribution. The entity designated the silence has been neutralized. The psychic harmonic is gone." There was a pause on the other end. "Excellent news, Captain Kale. And the colonists? What is their condition?" Kale's eyes met Sam's. he saw a universe of weariness in them. "The colonists are alive," she said, her voice a perfect dead monotone. "We have saved every single one of them. You can send in your counselors now. The Avengers' work here is done." She cut the connection. The lie hung in the air between them, heavy and suffocating. They had won. They had followed the rules of the mission. They had preserved the lives of the colonists. But as Sam listened to the distant, tortured screams of the people he had saved, he knew that some victories were indistinguishable from an execution. The Alliance would file their report, praising the efficiency of humanity's unique solution. They would never understand the true cost. They sent their peacekeepers to heal. Humanity sent its broken ones to burn the sickness out, leaving nothing but ashes behind. The Alliance arrived in a vessel of light and chrome, a stark contrast to the ugly, functional brutality of the Retribution. Medical teams in clean white uniforms flooded the station, their faces etched with professional concern as they administered sedatives and attached diagnostic sensors to the traumatized colonists. Counselors with gentle voices tried to speak to people who could no longer understand language, who could only rock back and forth, lost in the deafening noise of their own reborn consciousness. Sam watched it all from the docking bay, standing near the ramp of the Retribution. He felt like a ghost, an observer in his own home. The Alliance personnel moved around him with polite efficiency, their expressions a mixture of pity for the colonists and a kind of fearful respect for him and the Avengers. They were the ones who had walked into the fire. Kale stood beside him, her arms crossed, watching the proceedings with her usual detached coldness. Jonah had been moved onto their ship, still unconscious, a living casualty of their victory. Enya was already on board, sitting in the dark cockpit, a silent shadow waiting to move on to the next fire. "They'll be taken to a special facility on Alpha Centauri," Kale said, nodding towards the colonists being led onto the Alliance ship. "Years of therapy, psychic reconstruction. Some of them might recover a fraction of who they were. Most will not." "It doesn't feel like we won," Sam said quietly. Kale turned her head to look at him, and for the first time, her gaze wasn't entirely flat. There was a flicker of something ancient and tired in her eyes. "This isn't a war you win, Sam. It's a tide you hold back, the silence or things like it. They're a natural predator in the psychic universe. They feed on consciousness. The galaxy is getting louder, more connected. More minds means more food. We're not Avengers. We're not heroes. We're pest control." The Alliance commander, a tall, elegant being with skin like polished obsidian, approached them. He gave Kale a stiff, formal bow. "Captain Kale," he said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone. "The Galactic Alliance is in your debt. You have once again succeeded where our methods have failed. Your direct approach is brutally effective." There was a hint of distaste in the word brutally. "We get the job done," Kale replied, her voice giving nothing away. "Indeed," the commander said. He looked at Sam. "And you, Mr. Miller. Your courage was instrumental. The Alliance will see you are well compensated." Sam just shook his head. Compensated for what? For helping to shatter the minds of his friends. For trading a peaceful prison for a torturous freedom. The credits were meaningless. "I have a request," Sam said, surprising himself. The commander raised an eyebrow. "Name it." "I want a ride, off this moon, off this whole sector, anywhere. I just want to go somewhere quiet." Kale looked at him, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. The commander nodded. "A reasonable request. We can accommodate that. He turned back to Kale. We will be departing within the hour. May your journey be safe, Captain. He gave another stiff bow and walked away, clearly eager to be done with these grim, unsettling humans. When he was gone, Kale spoke. You are not coming with us. Sam looked at the ugly scarred ship, the Retribution. He looked at the woman who commanded it, a person so hardened by the horrors she faced that she had become one of them. He thought of the pained man and the empty girl inside. They were a closed, tragic circle, forever bound to the horrors they fought. He didn't belong with them. No, Sam said. You hunt monsters. I just fix pipes. I want to go somewhere I can just fix pipes again. There are no places like that left, Kale said, her voice soft. Not really. The universe is full of things that want to get inside your head. Sooner or later, you have to choose your noise. She held out her hand. It was a gesture so unexpected, so human, that Sam stared at it for a moment before shaking it. Her grip was firm, her hand calloused. Good luck, Sam, the maintenance tech, she said. You too, Kale, he replied. She turned without another word and walked up the ramp into the dark maw of her ship. The ramp hissed shut, sealing her and her broken crew inside. A few minutes later, the Retribution lifted from the docking bay with a groan of protesting metal. It rose into the blackness of space, and then it was gone. A brutal, ugly ship disappearing to fight a brutal, ugly war that no one else could. Sam stood there for a long time, watching the Alliance medics work. He listened to the weeping of the colonists. He listened to the weeping of the colonists. He listened to the crisp official orders of the Alliance officers. All the familiar noises of life and bureaucracy. But underneath it all, he could still feel the echo of the other silence. The perfect, peaceful, monstrous silence of the choir. The Alliance had sent its peacekeepers to offer a hand in friendship. Humanity had sent its avengers to clench a fist and punch the problem until it stopped moving. He was alive because of that fist. He was saved. But as he boarded the gleaming Alliance ship, leaving the ghosts of Phobos -7 behind, he knew he would spend the rest of his life listening to the silence they had left behind. A quiet so deep and empty it was louder than any scream,